Hello and welcome to this session. This is Professor Farhat. We will discuss how the COSO internal control framework is widely used or widely recognized as a guideline for establishing, evaluating, and maintaining effective internal control system within an organization. And we're going to look at the COSO framework within the context of a SOC engagement. I hope we all know what a SOC engagement. Otherwise, we are going to do a quick review real quick to make sure we're all on the same page before we go in and look at the COSO framework as it relates to the COSO engagement as a criteria. So let's take a look first at Farhat Lectures, which is my company. It's called the user entity. Now, I outsource my IT department. I don't have an IT department. What I do, I ask Best IT Service, the company called Best IT Service, to handle my IT work. They provide services to my company. Now, Best IT Services, I want to make sure before I hire them, I want to make sure they have good internal controls when it comes to confidentiality, security, privacy, processing integrity. Why? Because they're part of my company. They're integrated with my company. Therefore, I would ask them to issue a SOC 1 or a SOC 2 type of. So I will ask them to issue a SOC 2 report. Why SOC 2 report? Because I'm interested in their IT controls, as I mentioned, privacy, confidentiality, and processing integrity. Now, if I am interested in their internal control over financial reporting, I will ask them to issue a SOC 1, either a type 1 or a type 2. And SOC 1, type 2, once again, it's an internal control over financial reporting. Since I'm interested in their internal control, IT internal control, I'm going to ask for a SOC 2. SOC 2, again, SOC 2, you have type 1 and type 2 report. Now, the Best IT support, they will go to their auditor and they will ask them to do what? Test their claim about their IT controls, because Best IT support, they claim that they have integrity, privacy, confidentiality, security when it comes to their IT controls, but I want to see a report. So who's going to issue this report? The service auditor. So their service auditor, the service auditor is the auditor of the Best IT support, will issue this report, and we're going to assume it's SOC 2 type 2. It means I want to know about the effectiveness of these controls, not only the design. And how about my auditor? My auditor, if they're auditing my company, they may want to ask for a SOC 1 type 1 or a type 2 when they're auditing my company, because they want to know the internal control over financial reporting when it comes to Best IT services. So this is the big picture. So let's just kind of use a little bit more details so we can help try to understand this concept. So we have the service organization, which is what? Which is the IT support company. The subject matter is IT controls. They want to issue a report to give assurance to people like myself, their customers, assurance that their IT controls are functioning properly according to the trust criteria services that we talked about. The subject matter is this trust services criteria, and I want to make sure they're in compliance with COSO as well. And they make an assertion about this. Yes, indeed they are, but I'm going to ask them to do what? To issue a report. They're going to go to their auditor. Their auditor is going to look at the subject matter, which is their IT controls, and they are going to evaluate, test those IT controls according to the trust service criteria under the COSO, and issue a report. And again, what I'm looking for is SOC 2 type 2. It's about their IT controls, and I want to make sure they are functioning properly. So to go back to what we want to discuss here is, in the prior sessions, we looked at the trust services criteria, and we discussed those. In this session, we're going to be focusing on the COSO and how the COSO and the TSC are integrated together. And this is what we will discuss in this session, because COSO is a criteria, is a framework that the company uses when they are establishing their IT controls, and the auditor uses when they are evaluating the IT controls, the assertion that the company is claiming to issue the report. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, FarhatLectures.com. Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses.
My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses, broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today.
So starting with COSO, and I hope you are all familiar with COSO, because if you took the auditing exam, and this is why I suggest you always take the auditing CPA exam before you take information systems and control. Why? Because you should have known COSO inside out from your traditional audit. So the COSO internal control integrated framework is widely recognized guideline for establishing, evaluating by the auditor, and maintaining for the company effective internal control system within an organization. The AICPA's trust services criteria that we discussed in the prior session are aligned with the COSO framework. It's not a surprise. Why? Because everyone uses COSO. Therefore, the AICPA, well, said it's no-brainer that we align our trust services criteria with COSO, but tailored specifically for managing information and technology, because this is what the trust services criteria focuses. It focuses on security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy, which are the critical area in today's digital and data-driven environment. Now, these criteria, once again, they are used by management, by the company, to design a robust controls in these areas. The CPA, on the other hand, during the trust service engagement, what they do, they test them during which include attestation and consulting related to these categories. We're going to talk about attestation. They can also do consulting. We'll cover consulting in a separate recording. So they audit those internal control. They audit those claims that the company is making. But here we're going to focus on the COSO integrated framework. Let's look at the big picture. It has 5 components. I hope you know this. They are control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. So we have 5 components. I just list them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, each component will have a number of principles. For example, the control environment will have 5 principles. We're going to look at the 5 principles, and I'm going to briefly, discuss them. In addition to those 5 principles, this is where we have points of focus. Points of focus are a little bit more specific, because the principle is a general, it's a rule. Then we have points of focus, specific. Then we could have many, many points of focus depending on the company's environment. Now, within those points of focus, this is where the TSCs added their trust services criteria. And we'll see, we would look at a few examples. So what we're going to do first, we're going to look at each component, then we'll look at the principle, then briefly discuss points of focus. But I want you to see that the points of focus are below the principles. Now, when we get to control activities, which is component number 3, there are 3 principles, happens to be 3 and 3. We're going to have, in addition to those 3 principles and point of focus, something we call supplemental criteria. Those are kind of new and let's call them unique. Unique in a sense that they are in addition to the COSO principle, then information and communication 3 principles, and monitoring 2 principles, and they all have points of focus. Now, in addition to that, so this is total of 17 principles if we add up all the principles. In addition to that, we have additional categories. For availability, we have additional categories, A series, we're going to call them A series, privacy categories, P series, confidentiality, C series, and processing integrity, PI series. No, we don't have security category, because security covers everything. Security is a common criteria. We don't need additional criteria. We need to have security for any type of engagement. We need security for. So in this session, we're going to focus on the 5 principles, including the 5 components of the COSO, including the 17 principles. But the points of focus, there's so many of them. Just I want you to know that the TSCs add those points of focus to the COSO principle there. They integrated with them. Starting with the control environment, this is the foundation of the COSO framework, or the internal control framework. It encompasses the integrity, ethical values, and competency of the organization's people. So simply put, we'll look at management, at senior management, at the board of directors, at the audit committee. what is their sense of integrity? What is their competency level? It includes the governance and management leadership, the organizational structure, and the policies and procedures that guide the organization. So this is basically the control environment, and we have 5 principles under this. We have 5 principles under this component. This is one of 5 components, and those are: demonstrate commitment to integrity and ethical value. And I'm going to use IT-related points of points of focus or examples. So how do they demonstrate this? An IT company on a regular basis conducts ethics training and openly communicates its code of conduct, which emphasizes confidentiality and data security. So this is the component, and within the component, what do we have? We have the principle. This is one of 5 components. This also happens to be one of 5 principles, because there are 5 principles under the control environment. And I would say data security, training, those are points of focus. Now the TSC can add any points of focus within that demonstrate commitment to integrity and ethical value. So this is where the TSC integrate where AI CPA integrate the TSCs into the COSO framework. The second principle is exercise oversight responsibility. For example, a cloud service provider board on a regular basis reviews security audit results and participate in setting IT security policies. So points of focus, the board of directors is involved. Okay, this is an example of it. 3, the third principle, establishes structure, authority, and responsibility. For example, a financial institution clearly defines the roles and responsibility of their cybersecurity team, including who's responsible for monitoring and responding to breaches. And we could have many points of focus here. Demonstrate commitment to competency. Healthcare providers ensure that its IT staff are certified in the current privacy and security practices relevant to handling medical data. They are demonstrating commitment to competency. This is part of the control environment. Enforces accountability. For example, an online retailer includes cybersecurity performance matrix in the annual performance review of its IT management. Again, this could be a point of focus, and you could have many points of focus when it comes to enforcing accountability. So once again, this is one of 5 components. These are the principles, the 5 principles. Happens to be 5 principles for the control environment, and we could have many points of focus, and the TSCs are included within those points of focus. Let's move to the second component, which is risk assessment. So the component 2 of 5, risk assessment. Organization need to identify, analyze, and manage risk relevant to the achievement of their objective. So risk is anything that's not going to allow you to achieve your objective. Anything that's an obstacle is a risk for you. Risk assessment involve what? A dynamic process to identify. You want to look at your risk, analyze your risk, and form a basis in determining how risk should be managed. What should you do? How can you reduce the risk so the risk is low? So first you identify the risk and you deal with it. Now this is the component. Now within this component we have principles. I don't know how many principles, but let's look at the principles. 1, this is principle number 6. Specify suitable objective. You have to have specific objective. For example, a software company defines specific security objective that include maintaining 0 data breaches and complying with GDPR. For example, those could be points of focus, and we could have many of them for the specific suitability objective. So the objective is to comply with GDPR or comply with HIPAA. That's an objective. Principle number 7, identifies and analyzes risk. That's the principle. A bank perform a quarterly risk assessment to identify new cybersecurity threats and evaluate their impact on business operation. So on regular basis, points of focus, evaluate the business threat that impact your business operation. Principle number 8 under the risk assessment, assess fraud risk. An e-commerce platform analyzes transaction data to identify pattern indicating potential fraudulent activities. The point of focus, look for pattern that identify potential fraudulent activities, and we could have many points of focus under how you assess fraud risk. Number 9, principle 9 under the risk assessment, identifies and analyzes significant change. A telecommunication firm assesses risk associated with a new mobile application launch, focusing on users' data integrity and privacy collection. Well, what do you need to do? Make sure you assess any risk associated with a new launch. Here it's a new mobile application, and focus on the user's data integrity. So identify and analyze significant changes. Here we happen to do what? Launch a new mobile app. We could be launching something else. But again, this is the component risk assessment. And here we have 4 principles. I'm sure you're asking yourself, do I need to memorize this? It's going to be a lot of components. The components, you should be familiar with the components. Understand what each component is. You might be given a statement and identify under which category would this statement goes, under which component. You should be able to do that. Or you might be given a principle and try to identify it. For example, assessing fraud risk. If I'm giving anything about fraud risk, come on, I'm going to know it's risk assessment. The point is, understand that you're not expected to write an essay about, explain the COSO framework, the 5 COSO framework, and give an example of each. You're not going to be asked to do that, but you have to understand it. The third component is control activities, 3 of 5. These are actions established through policies and procedures to help ensure that management directives to mitigate risk to the achievement of the objective are carried out. Control activities are endless. You could have hundreds, millions of them. Okay, it's what you do. It's how you run the company. They can be both preventative and detective, and they may encompass approvals, authorization, verification, reconciliation, reviews of operating performance, security of assets, segregation of duties. Each one of the segregation of duties, you could have like 10 different things. Security of assets, 10 different things. So control activities is how the company run itself on a day-to-day basis. That's the component, control activities. The principle, well, select and develop control activities. For example, a data center implement biometric access control and encryption protocol to protect physical and digital access to sensitive information. Remember, we said we want a security of asset. This is a point of focus for it. 11, selects and develops general control over technology. An IT service provider develops and enforces control over software installation and update to manage vulnerabilities. Again, you have the principle, points of focus. 12, deploys through policies and procedures. An insurance company establishes detailed procedure for accessing and sharing confidential customer data, including multi-factor authentication and encryption. So notice here we have this principle 12, deploys through policies and procedures. So what you want to do, you want to establish detailed procedures for certain things. Now within this principle number 12, so notice here, I want you to focus here, we have added supplemental criteria, supplemental information. Okay, what are they? Well, logical and physical access control. So what we're saying is within deploy through policies and procedures, now we're looking at a little bit more specific. Logical and physical access controls. This focuses on controlling access to systems and physical site to prevent unauthorized access, ensuring only authorized personnel can access sensitive data and system. So this is not included in the traditional COSO. This is supplemental criteria specifically for control activities number 12. 2, system operation. These criterions involve monitoring and managing system operation to detect and control deviation in performance or security, ensuring reliable and secure operation. I would say those you got to know because they're a little bit odd. They might ask you, is this a supplemental criteria? Which one of the following is a supplemental criteria? So you want to know them. Change management. This details how entities manage changes to system and processes, requiring all changes to be authorized, tested, and documented to prevent security breaches. Risk mitigation. This covers how entities handle risk related to business disruption and third-party relationship, including developing continuity plan and assessing vendor security to maintain operational integrity. So these supplemental criteria, okay, they give you additional information, additional details to enhance the internal control environment. That's the purpose of them. Specifically, the IT internal control within the COSO. So that's all what they are. Again, you need to be familiar with them. So those are what we called supplemental criteria. So the TSCs could be added to the points of focus, which is below the principle, but those are kind of by themselves supplemental criteria. Then we have the 4 out of 5 component, which is information and communication. Well, this means what? Pertinent information must be identified, captured, and communicated. So any relevant information should be captured in a form and time frame that enable people to carry out their responsibilities. Simply put, we need to be informed about what's going on in a timely fashion. Effective communication must occur in a broad sense, flowing down, across, up and down in the organization, so the information should go to everywhere. This is the component. What are the principles? Uses relevant information. For example, a university uses automated tools to monitor and report on network traffic and alerts administrator of suspicious activities in real time. Point of focus here is make sure you have monitoring tools. Why? Because you want to use relevant information to monitor the network live. 14, communicates internally. A manufacturing company uses intranet site to communicate IT security protocols and update all your employees. Use the intranet to communicate with employees. Communicate externally. A consulting firm on a regular basis update its client about how their data is being protected in alignment with confidentiality agreement. Again, principle 13, 14, 15, and we could have below them points of focus. And monitoring should be 5 of 5. The last component is monitoring. These activities involve assessing the quality of the system performance over time. It means assessing, looking at it and seeing what's happening, monitor the system. This is accomplished through an ongoing activities, separate evaluation, or the combination of the two. So on a regular basis, you monitor live, or on a regular basis, you take a look, you evaluate if the system is working properly. And this is to ensure that internal control continue to operate effectively. Yes, you could have the best internal control at some point in time. It stops, you don't know if you don't monitor the system. Here we have 2 more principles. Conduct ongoing and or separate evaluation. The organizations, this is the principle, the organization selects, develops, and performs ongoing or separate evaluation to make sure whether the component of internal control are present and functioning. How would you do that? You'll have more point of focus specific to that. Evaluate and communicate deficiencies. If you find anything, well, let us know what you found and communicate any problems. The organization evaluate and communicate internal control deficiencies in a timely manner to those parties responsible for taking corrective action, including senior management and the board of directors as appropriate. So this is the last principle, 17th principle, and this is monitoring activities is 5 of 5. To look at the big picture again, what we did here, we looked at the 5 components. Control environment had 5 principles, risk assessment 4 principles, those principles. Then I told you when we get to control activities 3, you remember principle number 12, we added, I believe, 4 supplemental criteria. Then remember, within these principles, we have what we called points of focus. And this is where the TSCs, kind of whatever they want to add, they will take their control, and it could belong to information and communication. Then they will put it under certain principle, because there's 3 principles, whatever that principle belongs to. So the point I'm trying to make is this. In this session, we looked at the 5 component, we looked at the principle, we looked at the supplemental criteria. What's left is the additional categories. We have additional categories about availability, privacy, confidentiality, processing integrity. Those belong to those criteria specifically. So if you want about availability, we really need to understand what's availability. If the engagement is about availability, if it's about confidentiality. And notice here there is no security, because it's availability, privacy, confidentiality, processing integrity, and securities, which are the TSCs. But again, security is everywhere. We always have to take security into account. It's like a common criteria to all engagement. Let's take a look at this multiple choice question from farhatlectures.com and a SOC 2 report. Again, as soon as you say SOC 2, you would say, I'm looking at TSCs. I'm looking at IT internal controls. What does the evaluation of the suitability of the design control assess? What does the evaluation assesses? What are we assessing? We've said suitability of the design of the control. Whether the control are capable of detecting and preventing compliance issues, whether the controls are properly documented and communicated, whether the controls are appropriate to achieve the specified trust service criteria, whether the control have been authorized by management. So what do we mean by the suitability of the design? Okay, the suitability of the design, does this mean the controls are capable of detecting and preventing? Well, it's telling you detecting and preventing are the address detection and prevention. No, the suitability of the design itself cannot tell you whether they are capable of detecting or preventing. It just tells you about their suitability, whether they can achieve something, but they're not capable. We don't know if they are capable. Capable means, how do you know something is capable? Not from the design. You test it. You test something. Therefore, A is out. Whether the controls are properly documented and communicated, no, that's not. The suitability of the design of controls doesn't assess this, whether they are properly documented and communicated. If they are, that's great. That's part of their description. B is out. Whether the controls are appropriate to achieve the specified trust services criteria. Are they appropriate? Suitability is for, are they appropriate? Are they good enough? Suitable, appropriate. That's all what it assesses. It doesn't mean they are or they are not. It tells you from a suitability, it looks good, but we don't know if it's working properly or not. Remember, after suitability, what do we have to do? We have to test their effectiveness. But suitability, just whether they are appropriate or not on paper. Are they appropriate or not? I would say C is a good answer so far. Whether the controls have been authorized by management. I don't think, authorization by management, I don't believe that's an issue here. Whether they are authorized by management or not doesn't affect suitability of the design. That's authorized by management is an internal issue. Whether they were authorized or not, we don't know. But in a SOC 2 report, they should be authorized by management. The evaluation of the suitability assesses whether they are appropriate to achieve the specified trust service criteria, which is either privacy, confidentiality, processing integrity, security, availability, any of those. What should you do now? You want to go to Farhat Lectures if you're studying for your Information Systems and Control exam and look at additional MCQs, way more MCQs than any other CPA review course you can find on the market. Invest in yourself. Good luck, study hard, and of course, stay safe.